Hey, have you seen this yet? This just dropped like 20 seconds ago. And wow, talk about not happy. This is the rest of the interview with Joe regarding the situation with Wizards. And yeah, Joe is in his best, most appropriate way laying the smack down. And he says some things in this that might surprise some people. We have a small excerpt of this interview. It's on YouTube. It's from the character sheet via comicbook.com. It's a follow-up on yesterday. And now Joe's like kind of letting us know what he thinks about the current state of Dungeons and Dragons and who's responsible for it. And it might surprise a lot of people what he has to say. So yeah, obviously he's being his level best to be coherent and politically correct and say things in the way that he needs to say them to get in the least amount of trouble possible. And you can tell still, if you watch his body language and his vocal tonation, he's still very invested and very upset about the situation. And we still really don't have an answer in regards to future plans for his Dragonlance stuff and what, if anything, is going on with the 50th anniversary documentary he was working on. And for those of you who are blaming yesterday's news on the woke mafia, I think you can see where Joe stands in regards to that on this too. But he may just be, I don't know, I'm not going to put words in his mouth. We're just going to listen to it, pay very close attention to what he says at around the 3:58 mark. All right, so I am reproducing this without any permission. This is up available for free on YouTube on the comicbookcharactersheet.com. This is part of a larger interview. I have reached out to Character Sheet to see if they can send me the link to the larger interview. I would love to know what Joe is thinking, man. There's so many questions I'd love to, get into his mind. Like, did we ever meet? I feel like we did. I don't remember it, but I'm sure, he and I know TJ Storm. He knew TJ Storm. I hung out at Dave's videos, the Laser Place in Studio City. I know he's been there. So you would think he and I had crossed paths, but I don't know. I think TJ said we did, but I don't remember meeting the guy. But yeah, so here we go.
Dungeons and Dragons. In a recent interview with our parent site, ComicBook.com, Manganiello says that D&D is going downhill and blames the game's departure from its roots on Mike Mearls being pushed out as creative director of D&D back in 2019. Now you can
blames the fall of 5e on Mike Mearls being pushed out by Wizards of the Coast. Totally agree. Totally 100% agree.
You can hear his full thoughts in this clip.
Mike Mearls and Rodney Thompson, Peter Lee, Rob Schwab, what you would call Project Iowa. Project Iowa was towards the end of 4th edition. They put together a little crack team to create a new edition of the game, which they thought was going to be the end. They thought it was going to be over. Judging by the numbers of 4th edition, the vitriol towards that edition, they decided it's over. And everyone really left the game. Most people were playing Pathfinder, or even more people were playing Pathfinder. And so, Mike Mearls was put in charge of this team to try to figure out what to do next. And they started polling the fans that were.
So what he's saying is Wizards thought D&D was done. They had, admitted that they dropped the ball with 4E, and we've talked about that several hundred times. How 4th edition alone and how Wizards handle it is a perfect storm of how not to run a business, how not to run an edition, how not to treat a franchise. And of all the stupid things, the 4th edition wars is probably the stupidest thing Wizards has done leading up to the OGL. So when Mike and company was presented with this, they were under the impression D&D was done, and they were writing the last version of Dungeons and Dragons. And that, it feels like what he's saying is they didn't actually think it was going to ever see the light of day, that it was done.
Were left over. But mind you, at that time, whoever was left during 4th edition, really, 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 they were die.
I remember this survey. I remember receiving the survey he's talking about where they were asking people about this.
Hard lovers of the game. And so when you reach out and you ask a really concentrated fan base what to do next, you're going to get good answers.
And don't get me wrong, I love 4th edition.
Because there are people that have been with this thing from the jump, and this is what's wrong. And so the feedback was really fantastic for what went into 5th edition, and Mearls was smart enough, he listened to it all. And so, created this edition that then became the most popular tabletop gaming a system of all time. I mean, it's not
no question, number-wise, 5e during this time period, leading up to COVID and during COVID, 50 million players, the most popular, the most well-known, the most popular version of D&D, the most popular version of a tabletop role-playing game. You can't argue with that. Sorry, guys. I know people are going to say, but no, it is. It has the best press machine behind it.
Not even close. The 50 million people during COVID that were playing, that mind you is way less now, but that peak 50 million during COVID, that's Mike Mearls and company. They made a better edition than even Gary did.
There, bam, suck it. 5e under Mike Mearls is better than Dungeons and Dragons by GYGAX, according to Joe Manganiello. So for all those people who have been giving me shit for being a 5e fan, there, Mike Mearls 5e better than GYGAX D&D. Now, I don't know to be happy about that or sad about that. It was like, oh, really? You think that's version's better than classic OD&D? And that kind of sucks. Or I was like, yeah, dude, it was 5e is amazing. It's a really good edition. I mean, it's not really D&D, but what it is amazing. And I just cannot wait for all the old school, which remember, I'm no longer a member of the old school. I've been kicked out and received some pretty horrible things because of my statements regarding the old school. I just can't wait for them to spin this. How is this a bad thing? And we know I can't wait for the Rage Pigs to also spin this, that it's not Wizards of the Coast's fault. It's, somebody else's fault. Because GYGAX can do no wrong, according to the Rage Pigs, and 5e is embracing everything GYGAX wanted, and 5e is the best version of GYGAX's dream, even though Joe's saying, no, it's better than anything GYGAX wrote. The Rage Pigs are going to try and twist this into basically Joe saying it's the old school's fault. It's the old school's fault. D&D failed. It's GM Grumpy McGrump in California. The West Coast Grognards fail. It's that 5e is failing. It's not GYGAX, but Joe saying, hey, Mike did a better job and you guys kicked him out. But I'm just that's my personal interpretation. And of course I'm a little bitter. So yeah, ignore everything I say.
You have to give all credit to Gary and Arneson and kind of the gang in the Midwest, but what Mike Mearls did and company did with that game is mind blowing. And then of course, the Twitter mob rises up and with the pitchforks and the
torches. Yeah. But that was both sides, both sides of the Twitter mob were incredibly hostile and incredibly toxic. You can say how toxic and hostile the Sparkle Troll, Rage Pig, 5e side was, but you could also say the other side, the OSR, the OGL, was just as toxic.
And it was right in that weird kind of spot when all that was at its height, and everybody was really listening to the mob in that way. And there were some people within the company that saw their opportunity to try to go for Mike's head and get him out of the driver's seat.
Kyle Crawford.
And they were successful, and they were allowed to do it. And since then, it was kind of like I told Mike at one point, it's like Jimmy Johnson winning back-to-back Super Bowls.
He's going to make a sports reference here, so some of you might not know what he's talking about.
Bowls with the Cowboys, and kicking him out, replacing him with Barry Switzer, and then just dismantling the team. I mean, that's kind of what it was like. It was like there were a bunch of people that then saw their opportunity to try to take credit for what Mike did, try to launch and alter the game into a new edition that and it just has, it's gone downhill ever since.
So there we go. What do you guys think? And there will be more of this made available to us. I have reached out to ComicBook.com to see if they'll send me the link. I'm sure they'll make it available to everybody. As far as I know, I am the first person to jump on this other than ComicBook.com, but I don't believe the life. I can't wait to see how the Rage Pigs are going to spin this, that, you know, the Holy Saint Joe is saying it's their fault that D&D is bad. And I can't wait to see how the old school, the grognards, say, spin this where Joe says actually 5e is better than that Mike Mearls 5e is better than Gygax. And people are saying, oh, well, he's part of the woke mafia. Well, I think you can tell by his comments and regarding to the Twitter mob that he is not a part of the woke mafia. He, you know, I don't know how he votes, but I mean, yeah, he is in Hollywood, but so yeah, it's interesting, and I can't wait to see the rest of it. But he's obviously upset. You can tell by his tone. You can tell by his body. You can tell by the way he's stimming that he is trying very hard to remain calm and collected and just lay down the facts and his personal opinion. And he references sports because, you know, that's the thing most people understand. And his reference for those who, you know, who know what he's talking about is spot on. Now, in regards to 5e being the most popular, well, better than any other game ever. Well, I can't argue with that. We can argue, you know, whether it's a good system or a bad system, but in regards to sheer numbers, yeah, of course it was, because of the timing. You know, it's never going to be able to repeat that. No game is ever going to be able to repeat that. I mean, even GURPS and Pathfinder, when they were, you know, the number one selling, were never going to be as big as 5e because 5e had that huge media things behind it. Oh, we're getting comments. Wow, I've angered the RPG Grandma. What's up? I agree with that. Calg. I think Mike Mearls was doing his best to defend D&D turnaround, understanding the constants, and he did good. I remember the play test. I remember receiving the survey. I remember people talking through two Wizards of the Coast reps via, you know, Mike and stuff, and seeing these things. And you know, I still have the original edition of the D&D Next playtest, and it's nothing like 5e. It's pretty damn good. And, you know, what came out in that first 2-3 years was amazing. And the way Wizards and Mike handled 5e was amazing. Now we can say, you know, 5e today is not D&D. But for that first 2 years, it was as close to D&D as Wizards could make D&D. They were embracing the old and the nostalgia. So people like me were reading this going, oh, it's like coming back home. And they were embracing the new generation with the new mechanics and going, oh, I see this. So yeah, win-win. Oh, my phone's ringing. Thought I turned down the volume. So yeah, weird. I guess I got to answer that. And then, of course, Mike got kicked to the curb. New people came in, Crawford, Kyle Brink, Mackenzie, these other idiots, and they just tore it apart. And they fed into the Orca's racist bullshit. And they fed into the Twitter mob. And they, you know, you are a member of the Groganaz because you played before the end of 1986. I was playing in 1976. So what does that make me? I have played both old and new editions. I like them both. They change things every edition I have ever played. No, 5e has some great aspects of it. Every version has great aspects in it. There's good aspects and bad aspects in every version. Joe is spot on. I look forward to seeing the full interview. So do I. Sorry, that's the same era they pushed old scrollers out and told us orcs were racist. Well, the orc were racist was true. They never really pushed old schoolers out. They just knew the old schoolers weren't their target demographic anymore. And that's 100% true. That's just good business. You can't blame them for not gearing the game towards people who kept telling them, I don't play your game anymore and I hate you. And you're going, well, Wizards of the Coast hates us, so don't give them money. And Wizards of the Coast was just going, well, you told us you hate us. So I don't think they push the old school out. I think, to defend Wizards of the Coast as little as I can, they realize the target audience has changed and they're addressing the new target audience. And I'm sorry, 75-year-old fucks like me, we're not the target audience anymore. What I've read of 4E is great, but I'll be using it next game. IGM 4E is great. 4E is great. It's different. It's definitely a completely different mindset. It is so not D&D in thinking, but if you can make it through the mess and really embrace the stuff that in there, it's a good game. This was attacked by Minority of Weirdos. 5e is definitely sold better than AD&D. Definitely sold better. 5e's success wouldn't have happened if it weren't for brand's recognition over decades before. Yeah, but D&D had just come out of a horrible 20-year cycle. I mean, you got 90s, you've got GURPS, Cyberpunk, Vampire kicking D&D's ass. Then you go into the 2000s with 4E and Pathfinder kicking D&D's ass. So by the time 5e comes out, that brand recognition was not there as much as it was, say, 30 years ago. And then for those first 2-3 years, it wasn't really moving until the hype wagon began, until the Stranger Things stuff. Wizards of the Coast decided 28 cities were their audience. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wizards of the Coast does not know who their target audience is. The old folks like me were not the target audience. The actual people who play 5e were not the target audience. Wizards of the Coast was gearing the game, especially during the COVID Tasha's years, towards the Twitter mob and ignoring the actual people. And if you ask any 5e player, any of the green-haired, mentally deficient 5e players, as you guys call them, will tell you the same, that Wizards of the Coast was not talking to them. Joe always seemed like a straight shooter. However, he is probably Hollywood right, not fly over right wing. Oh my God. Stop blaming your problems on the woke boogeyman. Agreed. You can adjust. Yes, it's totally true. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Now people. Anyways, okay. Now you're just arguing with each other. No, Perkins, man. Perkins, you can just look at him. He is so sad. And he so does not want to be there. And you can just look at his body language and his face language and the way he talks and how badly he's taking care of himself, unless he has cancer, but I'm not going to speculate on that. But yeah, you can just look at Perkins in the latest interview and you can just see body language, vocal tones. He does not want to be there and he is not happy. Yeah. Anyways, I got to respond to this column. But yeah. So there it is. The link's down below. If you want to watch the argument, feel free to argue about it. It's interesting since he pretty much goes after both sides. So yeah, we'll see you soon.